Litecoin could be on the verge of a really big rally. And if you've watched the channel before, you know I don't say that lightly. I have used Litecoin in the past, and I'm sure I will continue to use it in the future as a scapegoat and also a reason as to why I think Bitcoin is much better to hold for the majority of a crypto cycle. The reason, however, behind my change of tune this video is down to a very simple comparison. Now, before I get into this, I do want to prefix. First of all, I'm sorry for the audio and video quality. I'm traveling and I'm recording on a laptop and a lapel mic, so I'll try my best in post to make it bearable. Second of all, if you haven't guessed, I'm very TA heavy. I don't like to speculate on what upcoming news or unexpected events might have on price impact. I like to deal with absolutes, and I like to deal with things that we can measure. So because of this announcement, we're most likely to see a price increase of this. I don't do anything like that. I only deal with absolutes, things that are quantifiable. Two of the biggest metrics that I use in my comparisons are time and percentage moves. And my base case, my normal, the thing that I use to anchor my comparisons is the halving, which is a fixed event in crypto that happens roughly every 4 years. Now, the last halving happened almost a year ago at this point, which is crazy to think about, back in April. And 4 years before that, we had a halving in 2020 that was at the start of May. 4 years before that, we had a halving that was at beginning of July 2016. During all three of these halvings, so far, Litecoin has, in a very, very vague and undisputable way, had a rally before the halving. It has then returned close to the low that it was at after the halving, or after this peak. It then rallies up again, and note that in this first and second halving, it doesn't break above this first peak. It's a lower peak. We then move back down, close to a low that we were at previously, but slightly higher here, and then we move into our bull run. So we get this 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we have to zoom out for the 5, 5. Second halving, if we zoom in, would you guess, we get a very similar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 move. So here we can see, get this rally up. 1, we get a peak before the halving. 2, we get a low, with the difference of it being before the halving this time. So the pre-halving peak, as I like to call it, before the halving. We also have COVID here. So that would be my explanation as why we dip lower. Whereas usually before we return to a similar price, here we broke down very obviously further down. I would blame COVID on this, but again, we have a very small sample size. So when we get an outlier event like this, it does mess up our predictions a bit, or it means that we have to assume things, and that compromises the accuracy of the rest of the prediction, in my opinion. But anyway, we get the 1-2 movement. We then get a second high after the halving. So we get a pre-halving high, post-halving high. This post-halving high is lower than the pre-halving high, like we saw in the first cycle. Return down to the lows, and we are slowly trending up. That's something I forgot to mention. During the first halving as well, we slowly trend up. Here we're also slowly trending up. And then we move to our 5, where we get our bull run, and that lasts a very long time. You can see it's 33 weeks. We move 800% up. And the way that I measured this, for the first cycle, because we had such a parabolic move, I was kind of coping here a little bit, trying to quantify what we got. And if we zoom out, we can see that for almost the past decade now, Litecoin has stayed within this trend, this slowly ascending wedge. I said, when we operated within this move, Litecoin made a similar move over a similar period of time. And also, the bull run for the rest of the crypto space happened towards the end of the year. Litecoin was very unique in this beginning bull run here. Not a lot of the rest of the crypto space saw this. So I said, in terms of actual Litecoin reacting to the general crypto market, instead of reacting on good news or Litecoin specific news, I said this is what it would most likely experience. I'm assuming that Litecoin isn't going to get any more specific Litecoin news that will be good or bad for its price. I'm just assuming this is how it will react with the rest of the crypto space. You know, I want crypto isolated stuff only. And I basically said, probably only worth measuring from here. Because this was, again, like I've already said, this was isolated only to Litecoin. Only Litecoin saw this move. However, the whole crypto space saw this move. So, okay, cool. where does that leave us now? Well, looking at the halving, and as it's been almost a year, things are much more definite, and we get this pre-halving high, like we've seen before with the last two cycles. We get this pre-halving high. We then come back down and put in a lower low. So again, we notice that every cycle there is variation, because the first cycle, first halving, we didn't put in a lower low here. We put in a higher low, and then we continue to put in more higher lows. We do follow that trend so far. We could put in a higher low here, depending on what happens in the next few months. But anyway, we've moved from 0 to 1 to 2, and I would say we've also put in a pretty definite 3 here, which is, again, a variation of what we've seen before, putting in a higher high than the pre-halving high. So again, zooming out, we can see that these last two cycles, these last two halvings, this 0.3 has always been lower than 0.1. Here, that's different. Our first cycle, we had 2. That was higher up than 0. And it almost followed a straight line up, all the way up from 0 through 2 through 4. Here we can see 0 was above 2, so it wasn't a straight line through all 3 points. And we get the same thing so far this cycle. Or, well, no, we do get the same thing as the previous cycle. There is no straight line that passes through the 3 points 0, 2, and 4. Only 2 and 4. Now, in my last video, I spoke about how we had this dip, and that was 2 weeks ago. How we had this dip, and in my opinion, I didn't think we would probably come back down. I thought it was possible we could come back down and put lower and tag this line. You know, I have no way of telling the future. It very well could do anything, but in my opinion, I thought that was most likely the low. And to be honest with you, depending on how you want to draw this trend line, also can, it'll make it agree or disagree. Because nobody's going to really argue with me over this trend line, because it hits all the same points, basically. It just overlaps here and there. But it basically is the same line, only this one tags this low, and that would be marking the low. So now we've bounced off this low. That would be 0.4, like we had last cycle, where we get the low that tags this line. That's number 4. It's bull run o'clock, baby, up only from here. Now, I hope I've made it clear at this point, but every cycle so far, there has been some kind of variation. Whether it's been constantly putting in higher lows, or whether it's putting in higher highs, or whether it's front-running the bull run, and then also being a part of the rest of the crypto space's bull run. So it's basically getting 2 bull runs in one. Either way, every cycle there has been something that is very distinctively different to what's happened to the rest of the cycles. I think it's important we keep that in mind, especially when dealing with the current cycle. You shouldn't bank on something happening again. Now, over the last few cycles, we've always seen the rally happen pretty quickly after 0.4. We put in 0.4, and more or less within a couple of months, price is looking pretty good. And a good way of kind of measuring this on average is seeing how long it takes for Litecoin to move above, we'll say, the higher of the 2 peaks. So we'll say for the first 2 cycles, 0.1. How long does it take for Litecoin to move above the highest peak? In this second halving, it was 8 weeks, so 2 months basically. And in this in the first halving, after 0.4, which is debatable where you want to put this, to be honest with you, but I said here because it's the lowest point after this rally that we got. How many weeks did it take us to hit this week? Would you believe 7 weeks, basically 8. So here we've seen 2 months. The last few cycles, the last 2 cycles, / the only other 2 pieces of data that we have to compare, we saw it took 7 or 8 weeks from this low. If we're assuming that this is the low, this is the final low for Litecoin in relation to what it's seen in the past, and if it's going to follow the same rough and ready pattern, we're going to map 7 or 8 weeks on from this week, and then we should be above the higher peak, or at least we should be above the first peak, even though that is the lower peak. Again, there's so many different ways of measuring this, and so many caveats that you can fall into. But basically, end of March is when we should be above at least the first peak, but it could also be above this peak. Honestly, I don't know. Again, that's assuming a lot, and that's also relying on things playing out the same as they did last time, which things rarely do. but you're looking at about 8 weeks, and that would be a rally starting at the end of March. If we take a look at, again, previously, how long do rallies in the crypto space last? In 2017, it was kind of 2 months of a job. You know, we had 6-7 weeks of really strong price movement, and that's ignoring the isolated bull run Litecoin had by itself. 2021 was a different story. That lasted for a very long time. We had 33 weeks of bull run. So again, kind of depending on which way you want to look at, if we come back to this fourth point and, you know, we can say we'll give ourselves 2 months, again, you're looking at the bull run, you know, kind of being over by the end of May, or sorry, by the end of April, basically same time as the previous comparison. Or if you want to give it the 33 weeks, again, assuming this is the low, 33 weeks brings you out roughly to September Q3, Q4 of this year. And that would be when the peak is. Again, if it's going to play out the exact same way, which is the only thing I can guarantee you in crypto, is that it won't play out the exact same way, because we've seen that before. There is no exact same way. There's always variation. So just to keep something in mind, again, in my opinion as well, I don't think we're really going to see Litecoin do anything that special with its price. I think it's going to probably return to its previous all-time highs, maybe push a little bit above, but nothing special. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't quite return to these highs either. I could definitely see Litecoin capping out somewhere around $280 to like $320, but I would be happy with that. Again, I don't own Litecoin, so this is an unbiased opinion, if you will. Anyway, that was the US dollar. Let's have a quick look at the Bitcoin chart. I love seeing this chart because, again, like I said, I'm a bit of a Bitcoin maxi. I would hold Bitcoin most of the cycle. And I think this chart does a great job of explaining why I hold Bitcoin most of the cycle. Because Litecoin has just gone down. Ever since it hit the crypto scene back in 2014, it has been unable to put in a higher high against Bitcoin. Ever. Literally ever. And something that we do always point out as well is that during the halving, usually for roughly an equal amount of time for before and after the halving, Litecoin trades on a significant and steady decline, which I think is a pretty obvious when, again, you look. That's what the white line is for. I'm sorry for the mess that this graph is, because it has one outlier here that shrinks everything terribly. So I'm going to try to exclude it. Anyway, we can see that Litecoin trades down for about 90 weeks here, close to 2 years, basically, just trading down against Bitcoin. And we get the same thing the next halving. Nuts. We get the same thing, trades down basically. And you can choose different points to when you start measuring. I'm being generous in this case because I'm not measuring from these peaks. I'm kind of measuring just from kind of in the middle of nowhere, to be honest with you. So realistically, this is even longer. We did have a break above. If you haven't seen this chart before and you're a Litecoin maxi, or you have a lot of faith in Litecoin, cover your eyes and ears. Fair warning. This was the 2021 bull run for Litecoin against Bitcoin. Just so you know, it made from trough to peak, and I'm being generous measuring wicks, it made about 120% of a move. That was the 2021 bull run. You can't even argue it was statistically, it's the bull run where the most money has moved into crypto. It was absolutely absurd. It was the best crypto bull run that we will probably ever see, because the amount of money printing, you know, rates were zero everywhere around the globe for, you know, like the whole year, basically. Litecoin just about outperformed Bitcoin, and it only managed to do this. There was a 10-week period, basically, technically less, that Litecoin did this for. So that, for me, was like the definite nail in the coffin. You know, that was like the stay the fuck away from Litecoin. That's what it does in the biggest bull run. Good luck to whatever it's going to do after that, because we're not getting conditions as good as this ever again, realistically. Or at least I hope we don't, because that means something absolutely terrible has gone wrong with the globe in general. Anyway, Litecoin continues to trade down. And again, similar story. I'm being generous. I'm not measuring from the high that cycle. I'm just measuring from a high that looks kind of nice with this line. Although I could be measuring from November and measuring from June 2023. So you can add an extra 6 months to this if you want. basically Litecoin goes down and we've broken this trend finally, which is what we do often see. We see some kind of little hump that breaks this long-term trend line where it kind of sticks its head above, isn't happy with what it sees, and then sticks its head back into the mud. We will probably see something similar. We can see it's kind of fighting for its life here. It has managed to put in a higher high, which is huge news for Litecoin, but it also has managed to put in technically a higher low as well. I don't know where it could go. I'll happily eat my hat and be wrong. I would love for that to be the case. I just have no faith at all in Litecoin, to be honest with you, on its Bitcoin chart. That doesn't mean it can't make money on its US dollar chart. And that's how a lot of people will look at it. But I think if you've been around crypto for long enough, you measure everything against Bitcoin, to be honest with you. That's the one constant in the crypto space. So yeah, technically, last few weeks has been very good for Litecoin. The last month, in fact, has been good for Litecoin. And it's almost done a 2x from the low to the high. So that's quite a lot of volatility that Litecoin doesn't usually see. But also what's important to remember is the price is at such a fraction of what it was at any stage during the rest of the cycle that, a 2x is hardly, a 2x isn't doing you any good when you've dropped 98%. What does that bring you up to? If you, that's measuring from the low. Now we're at 97% down. That's a whole extra percent you guys haven't lost. You know what I mean? And I know, obviously, none of you realistically are holding from that far back, but it just illustrates the point. Litecoin's had its teeth kicked in so many times that the fact that it still has one tooth, it's not a huge victory. You know what I mean? But again, this could be the beginning of a huge trend reversal, and we might see Litecoin return back to its all-time high of 0.05 Bitcoin. I will remain skeptical. If Litecoin wants to throw it back, flip it and reverse it, you know what I'm saying? I'll happily become a Litecoin maxi. But it has to actually do something for me to have any kind of faith. Again, why would I put my money in Litecoin when I can put it in Bitcoin and not lose money? Again, maybe a better way to visualize this is if we go 1 over Litecoin Bitcoin and we show this chart and it shows how many Litecoins can buy you 1 Bitcoin. So at launch, 30 Litecoins bought you 1 Bitcoin. At current price, it's just under 700 Litecoins buy you 1 Bitcoin. So maybe that's a bit easier to kind of visualize. And again, this is something we looked at the last video as well. You can see the pre and post halving timeframes where the value just crashes and crashes. Or, this is the inverse. So we're obviously seeing Bitcoin outperform Litecoin drastically for a prolonged period of time. Anyway, if you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, or if you're a Litecoin lover, leave a dislike. That's totally fine. I am always interested in hearing why I think I could be wrong. I'm always open to learning. So please comment down below. Tell me something you think I've missed, or just blindly hate. It's chill, it's whatever, I don't really care. Either way, thanks so much for watching. Take care and peace.